So after watching the movie, reading the book, or even seeing the trailer, you might walk away with the impression that the people in this desert planet share the same religion as Bedouins in Arabia on our planet. And if you think the Fremen are cool with their tough warrior ways, then you might think that Islam is equally cool. Don't they share the same characteristics?
So. We'll find out.
I was hoping for a little bit of a taste there to see what's coming up.
Well, I don't want spoilers.
Say? Okay.
We'll dive through. We're going to go through step by step, see what the requirements are for being a Muslim, see what the requirements are for being a Fremen, see if they line up.
Okay.
Or they crash and burn.
Okay. Well, we will start first with the Zensunni religion. Now, this is a brief overview. It's just my stab at what it really is, looking over all the books, not only Frank Herbert's books, but also the prequel books that are done by his son, Brian Herbert, and Kevin J. Anderson. So what is the Zensunni religion? The events in Frank Herbert's Dune take place in about 20,000 years from today, when the human race is spread across the universe. The Zensunni religion is made up. It's created by the author for his books. It's a syncretic faith that combines elements of Zen Buddhism and Sunni Islam. Zensunni teachings emphasize inner peace, harmony with nature, and the pursuit of enlightenment through meditation and self-awareness. They value simplicity, humility, acceptance of life's hardships, viewing suffering as a path to spiritual growth. They have a vague concept of a deity representing a universal consciousness or divine presence that they call, brace yourself, Buddha. Rituals and practices within the Zensunni religion include prayer, meditation, and communal gatherings. Now, the history of the Fremen needs to be added to this because we're starting off with this Zensunni religion, this combination of Islam and Buddhism. And then we're saying, hey, there's a particular people who took that. That was their religion. And then they shaped it a little bit differently. So we need to look at the history of these people. The history of the Fremen, who play a central role in the story of Dune, descended from Zensunni wanderers who migrated to Arrakis from the planet Portran over 1,000 years before the events in the first Dune book. Their cultural identity revolved around survival, shaped by the history of persecution and Arrakis' harsh environment. This forged them into resilient warriors, utilizing their skills to fend off technologically superior adversaries. Lying in patriarchal collectives called sieches, they adhere to polygamy and strict rules of governing water usage. Each siech is led by a naib and a reverent mother who has gained her status by consuming and transforming the water of life. Polygamy was commonplace among the Fremen society, with more prominent men having several wives and children with each of them. Does that sound vaguely familiar? At least some of that. So there's some
on skin deep so far.
Okay,
there's some similarities,
right?
And it could, if you're not experienced with it or don't have any sort of actual backing, you could come to the conclusion that they're the same.
So just how did they adapt Zensunnism to their new world? Well, the Fremen, number one, fought first and had peace later. Although they were known for their patience and stealth, the non-violent ways of the Zen Buddhism side of their religion was more of an afterthought. The desert is harsh, and so are those who want to exploit the Fremen. The Fremen fight back. Number two, God, Buddha, is a sandworm. They altered their belief in Buddha. Fremen believe that the sandworms, which they call shai-hulud, are a physical embodiment of the one God that created and governed the universe. Number three, water is sacred. Water is sacred to the Fremen. If you misuse it, abuse it, you give up your life. A person's value is the volume, his volume in water. Number four, messianic prophecies, including the so-called prophecies from the Bene Gesserits, who use religion to manipulate other cultures as part of their missionaria projectiva to control history. Number five, psychic female shaman. In each CH, the position of the Reverend Mother is also an artifact of the Bene Gesserit's cultural manipulation. She fills the role of a tribal shaman, complete with psychic abilities. Sound like Islam? Right? There's more. There's one more. Psychedelics and orgies. Once the Reverend Mother has converted the water from its poisonous state, the Fremen drink the changed water, which has narcotic properties. Some of their latent prescience and telepathic abilities come to the forefront. Their inhibitions lowered, giving way to wild dancing, and finally, perhaps, an orgy. So, knowing that then, we're going to compare what I just said to Islam. And if we need to, we can bring back up some of these points that I brought up with them. I'll be kind of, I'm looking at these other two guys as being more experts on Islam. And then based on what you heard, we're going to compare the two. That's an overview of the Fremen. How does that match up with Islam?
There's a lot. There's a lot to go through. Well, first of all, you have the concept of Tawheed, which is the oneness of God. And how that would line up with it being sandworms, I don't know. Thaddeus, you got anything on that one?
Well, so most Muslims today would deny this, but in the Islamic texts, Allah is clearly a physical being. He's clearly, now he isn't shaped like a sandworm. He's definitely shaped like a human being, only much larger. However, he has some distinctive characteristics that distinguish him from an ordinary human being, and thus he is unlike anything in creation. But so we can't properly say what he looks like, but we can say for sure that he's a physical being from the sources.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah, so he's physical. He's got a shin that's unlike any other in creation ever, because that will be shown on the day of resurrection. And all the Muslims will know exactly how the shin should look because they have this picture in their head, except they're forbidden to have a picture of Allah in their head for some reasons. It might be a little bit of contradictory, but hey, that's what we expect from Islam after all.
Okay, so I got a comment here. I want to be able to pull up. This is from Thomas Hall. He said, Sufism would have worked better. Sunni is about as different from Zen as you can get.
Yes.
And this is what Francis Boole said. Hey, you could have done this. And that makes sense. You know, that if you combine those two. Now, Sufism is a little more on the mystical side. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And I think that it bears in mind that what we perceive as being Islam is primarily the Salafi movement coming out of Saudi Arabia, funded by oil money. They have way more money, way more influence, way louder in media and whatnot, and thus we associate that with Islam. But globally, Islam is actually quite diverse. In Southeast Asia, for example, where Islam is in the majority, it's a very syncretic religion. They've adopted all kinds of elements from traditional tribal religions, lots of mystical elements. So I think it does fit in with Islam, broadly speaking. Now, Sunni Islam specifically, that's kind of an odd choice there. But the Sufism is 100% based on mysticism. It's very much compatible with this idea of a particular individual being gifted and having special connection with the creator. So I could definitely see how Islam in general and specifically Sufi ideas could be melded with Buddhism.
How about Shiites? If it was like Zen Shiite, would that other than praying, they pray 7 times a day? Other than that, what other characteristics would you come out at the other end?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, Shia and Sunni Islam are definitely very different. They have been at war with each other since the early days of Islam, after all. One characteristic that Sunnis are very critical of Shiism is that they give special preference to imams of the past, of their ancestors, if you like, venerating their graves, performing rituals on behalf of ancestors, and so on. So that is definitely one distinctive element of Shia Islam that is not found in Sunni.
Okay. And you would say with this whole concept of Reverend Mother in the CHs that the Fremen have, they are led by a naib, which I think is an Arabic word. And then the Reverend Mother then is sort of like this female shaman. And she can hear, at least the Bene Gesserits did. I believe that she could also hear the voices of her female ancestors.
Yes.
So probably, yeah.
Falling
It sounds
in line
like
with the whole mysticism aspect.
Sufism would have been a better combination of the two. So I have another comment here I'm going to throw up. It's could you pronounce this guy's name, please? Because I know I'm probably going to be butchering it. Khan, I got that.
Yeah, Mahmudinaz Khan.
Okay.
He also goes by Big Mahmud, so I usually become Big Mahmud.
Okay.
He's a big fan of me. He follows me around everywhere. So,
and he made it here today. So his comment was the Southeast Asians have also incorporated their Hindu practices.
Yeah, that's correct.
Incorporated into Islam. Was this be like Indonesia?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So as far as I know, Indonesia is the most populous Muslim nation, or at least it was at one time. I don't know if it still is. But so that would make sense. And he had one other comment here. Might as well put this up. He says, real Islam is monotheistic. Allah is one. So.
Yeah. So this would be, as far as the sandworm concept goes, that would not be in line with Islam.
I was. Yeah.
He'd actually agree with us on that. The Muslim would agree with us on the concept that, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't.
So what we're doing is we're comparing. If you missed out on the earlier part, I apologize. There was a whole section where I had just gone over what the Fremen religion is. These are the people in the movie Dune and also the book. They're key. They're a key culture. They're very instrumental to what happens in all the books. Their culture is their religion is a mixture between Buddhism and Sunni Islam, and we're trying to figure out how those two would mix because I just don't see that happening. But with that goes when the Fremen first got to Arrakis. This is a bit of a spoiler. I was going to wait to this later because we're also looking at some Arabic words that are used in the book that the author Frank Herbert pulled them in and used them liberally within the book. So when this Zensunni wanderers first got to Arrakis, the planet, the desert planet, and then became the Fremen or the Fremen, they saw these giant worms, these giant, huge sandworms that could swallow several cars at one shot. And they thought what they named them? Their word was shaitan. And that's in the books. So it went from shaitan to shai-hulud, which is what they viewed as Bud'Allah, their god. So talk about doing a 180. It's like, oh no, this isn't shaitan. It's Bud'Allah instead.
Well, at least it's not a black dog.
Well, that could be too. So there's a whole lot of comments here. And while you guys are talking, I'm going to try to go through them.
We'll go on to the next point here. So you have the 5 pillars of Islam here. One of those 5 pillars would be, of course, the confession of faith that there is no other God but just Allah, and that, of course, you got to stick Muhammad on there. So Muhammad's his prophet, right? So you stick Muhammad on there with Allah. That definitely looks like partnership to me. Just saying, but hey, it's there. So the Fremen don't do this at all.
No.
In fact, there's no mention of Muhammad. They are waiting for a Messiah character to come, but there's no concept of Muhammad being even involved.
Yeah, and this would not be too much of a spoiler, I think. Maybe it would. So I should probably put the spoiler alert up here. There is a character in the book who does fulfill their version of what the Messiah would be. Now, Messiah in Zen Sunniism I don't think it's inherent to it. It was something that was added later by the Bene Gesserits, which were another group, and they're trying to manipulate religions by adding all these different ideas of things happening. But it is a very big characteristic in the book, and it's one of Frank Herbert's main goals, as far as I can tell, is to show that religion is very dangerous, and especially religions that talk about a key messianic character is dangerous for.
So we need to get rid
his
of all
reasons.
religions.
That's what his approach is. Yeah.
Or just use the religions responsibly. Make sure that the person in control has the power of a religion behind them, just for the sole reason of controlling the masses, the stupid masses, and that's about it.
That's what his approach is, and if you very much see that philosophy through the book, that religion has no power in and of itself, is just a political tool. I'm not saying that. It's what the author's perspective is.
Well, so the Fremen have failed Tawhid. The Fremen have failed one of the pillars of Islam, the statement of faith. Thaddeus, what's another pillar of Islam?
So we can go in the traditional order. That Shahada, of course, is number one, most important thing. And then number two most important is the 5 daily prayers.
So, do the Fremen perform the 5 prayers? Now, it has to be at very specific times, and they have to have the call for prayer itself.
Do they do that as a? There is nothing in the books, but what I want to do that's specific for 5 times or 7 times, depending on what your background is.
Or if you only go with the Quran, it's like 3 times.
Okay. Whatever hadith that came from, whatever the deal is, right? Certain times during the day, those prayers would be done. You do not see that as part of the Fremen religion. If it is, it's not shown.
Well, if it is, it would be a big thing that would definitely be shown.
Yeah, because they'd have to stop. They'd look at the sun and say, "Stop!" And where are they going to pray to? There is no center for their religion either.
No,
there is no Mecca, so they would not turn a certain direction.
So. Yeah, so they don't have you never hear the call to prayer. You never see them going down praying. Now, in the more recent one that I just watched, part 2, they do have prayers that they do, but again, it's not at specific times. It's just whenever they feel like they need to pray, they pray. At key events. So that's when they decide to pray. So they don't really have that in the book. There's no mention of prayer in the book. And then in the movies, they try to show it. And I definitely say part 2. Now, we'll do the review of part 2 on Saturday. But as a little sneak peek of that, they definitely do use a lot more Islamic phrases, as well as make it look more Islamic. The Fremen definitely.
Okay, Islamic phrases, you mean Arabic phrases, right?
Phrases that would be associated with Islam itself, such as jinn, referring to the character who fulfills the prophecies as the prophet. Specifically, the prophet repeatedly. Not a prophet, the prophet.
Okay, so I'm going to show it. This is a clip from the movie, and we're talking about prayer right now, so I wanted to bring this up. See if I can... sound
So that was the prayer reference in part 1. Again, that's added for the movie. That's not in the book, but that's as close as they get.
Yeah. So there's a comment here saying, this is from MD. The Fremen were called, no, it's actually it's Zensunni. It's with the Z. Zensunni wanderers. I also assumed they may have started in Sunni Islam. The Bene Gesserit added religions to their for their Missionaria Project even. Yes, we had reviewed this earlier. If you rewind a little bit, you'll see it. they did do it, and they came from the planet Portran. They were wanderers for a while until they ended up at Arrakis. So for anybody joining recently, that is the case. Thaddeus, you want to add anything to the concept of prayer
so
if you took it out?
So that scene there is, I think that's clearly modeled off of Islamic prayer. I often get Muslims and non-Muslims who assume that anyone who has any kind of head covering, they must be a Muslim, male or female for that matter, not just females, but anyone who is covering themselves by praying, they must be a Muslim. Kind of the ritualistic chanting noises sounded very similar to what now granted, they also sound similar to Buddhism, so I can't say that is like essentially Islamic, but I think it was definitely compatible with it. So I would say that scene could have easily been a futuristic scene from an Islamic mosque.
Okay.
And I think that's kind of the point of this video, is to say, hey, if you guys don't know much about Islam or aren't familiar with it, or run into people whose only familiarity with Islam is this movie, they would come off with some assumptions that aren't accurate, and we should definitely address.
Right. And I have a comment here from Jack, just a point of clarification. I want to clarify this. Must be a Muslim in sci-fi. So what we are doing is we're comparing the two. We would not really expect 20,000 years into the future. This is Frank Herbert's idea now. This is his own made up thing. He's taken two completely incompatible religions and he's melded them together somehow. And he must have taken some components out of it to be able for it to fit together and be what's the proper term, Thaddeus? Self-consistent, I'm putting you on the spot.
Just consistent, I think.
Okay, fine. Self-consistent. Yeah, not contradicting itself.
So we've gone through Tawheed, definitely failed that. We've gone through the statement of faith, the Shahada, don't have that. We've gone through the 5 daily prayers, they didn't have that. So the next one on the list would have to be fasting during Ramadan. Do you see that?
I did not see any of that in the background that they had. And they may do some fasting, but
no, there's never
nothing
any show of fasting at all. And now if Muslims are fasting, let me ask you, Thaddeus, would we hear about it?
We would.
They seem to go out of their way to make
Jesus
posts.
says, right, when you fast, don't make people know about it. Before you go out, wash your face so that no one knows you're fasting. And Muslims are like, oh, I'm fasting. I'm going to post this all over my social media and tell everyone I know that I'm fasting. So yes, they would tell for sure.
So they would definitely show it, be telling it, see how separate we are, see how holy we are. We fast for an entire month with, Thanksgiving every day.
Right. Here's a comment that was just based on, there's a couple of comments, well, quite a few comments that are based on the video that we just saw. And I thought this was interesting. He's answered, I always feel peaceful when I pray as a Christian and find Gregorian chants very calming. So you mentioned, Thaddeus, some of the cultural influences in that scene that we just saw. It almost sounded like a Gregorian chant there also. But I guess you could also ask, what were the differences? I mean, you have men, it looks like men and women praying together. Would that not be something that would not be permitted?
Correct. Definitely not. It's explicit teaching of Muhammad that men and women should be separate during prayer. Indeed, if a woman crosses in front of a man while he's praying, that invalidates his prayer. Strangely, exactly the same thing in the very same hadith even is said about dogs. So Aisha replies, you have compared us to dogs. And Muhammad's like, so?
Yeah.
I kind of like dogs, but I don't think if I compared my wife
Muhammad did not.
If I compare my wife to a dog, I will be in the doghouse with the dog. So that would probably not be a good idea.
Very much so.
Another comparison here comes from Nicodemus. He said the architecture symbolism, also talking about some of the flavor that is there with these prayers.
Yeah, I say that. Well, even the architecture in general has a lot of parallels with it. Again, whenever you're dealing with Muslim architecture, you don't see pictures or images. You see arches, lots of arches
And
everywhere.
Geometric patterns.
Yes, and we saw that definitely in like the lattice work in that video, and as well as in the buildings themselves in Arrakis. You see that, which Arrakis is the main city in there. You see that sort of style, although I don't see a single mosque at all.
No, that's the other thing too. Well, there are many dissimilarities between the two, and so I think we could probably say, if it had caught just maybe one or two of these pillars, it'd probably say, okay,
We still have two left.
You still have two left.
We still have two.
Okay,
left.
so we
two
may hit it
left.
yet. We may hit it yet.
And I think one of them would actually work.
And this is appropriate comment, so I wanted to put this up here from Hutchie saying, "Morning nerds." Now he's a few hours ahead of us in Scotland, so yeah, I guess it would be morning for him, and he must have stayed up very late for this. I appreciate it, buddy. So you got more pillars.
Some more pillars. Yes. The next one will be the Hajj, the pilgrimage. That is, how important is the pilgrimage?
Yeah, so every able-bodied Muslim, so unless you have a special exemption from your mom because you're physically disabled or something along those lines, is required to make at least one pilgrimage to Mecca in their life. If they don't fulfill this requirement, well, then they're kind of in big trouble with Allah. So it's extremely important. Muslims often speak of taking the Hajj as the highlight of their life, as the most important thing they ever did. So very central.
Okay, so not having it would be important. So one of the key ingredients of the Hajj would be you have to have some place to go, right?
Yeah.
And
a black stone to kiss.
Well, okay, that's part of it. But you have to have a if you're going to have a pilgrimage, you have to go someplace.
Yes.
Right? There is no central location ever spoken about with the Fremen. They have their own little CHs that they're in, their own communities in the rocks, because if you go into the sand, or especially the deep desert, you're going to be eaten by a worm. So you have those places. But other than that, nothing special. There's a city called Arrakis that all these foreigners come to that you can sell your stuff to, but no sacred spot that's really you take a pilgrimage to.
In the books, we eventually do see a sacred place that they do take pilgrimages to. It's not in the book. It's not in the pre-Messiah point in their concept.
Yes.
It's afterwards that you do see this sort of pilgrimage,
right?
But it's never actually required.
Yeah. So for the Zensunni religion to be Sunni Islam, you would have to have that there. There are some things that happen later in history where there are some sacred objects that'll be venerated, but not early on.
So we have one last pillar to go over, and then one concept that's pretty definitely in the newest movie comes out quite a bit. So that is, what is the last pillar of Islam?
The last pillar is zakat. And I specifically say zakat rather than giving a translation, because it's usually translated as charity or alms, which is very deceptive because it's not. Charity in a Christian conception is voluntary. It's amount that you choose to donate. That is not what zakat is. Zakat is an obligatory percent that every Muslim has to give. They call it charity, but it in fact not.
So, and now that would, I'm just throwing this out there real quick. So would that be used to help non-Muslims out, or would that be something specific?
No, absolutely not. It's used, well, when it's properly used. You know, we can say that sometimes it ends up in the leader's pockets, but when it's properly used for its intended purpose, it benefits poor Muslims.
So the community pulls together and donates, is obligated to donate, turn over whatever they have, whatever that amount is, to the pool. And it's supposed to be, as long as there's no level of corruption in it and ruled by perfect individuals that never sin, would then be divvied out correctly to the Ummah.
Correct.
Now, that is similar to something that does happen with the Fremen.
Okay. How's that?
With their most valuable asset.
What is the most valuable? Okay, you guys listening, what is the most valuable asset to the Fremen? I know someone's going to get that. And as we're waiting for that response, I'm going to put up one answer that was done here. And this was, MD said, the only thing that a Hajj that I recall from the Dune universe came later books where they would pay respects to Paul's father's skull, Leto the First, his skull. And that is correct. That's why I kind of mentioned that it's not really, because you're supposed to start as this Sunni religion, but it doesn't have any kind of specific spot to venerate or anything like that. So it did come later. It did have that later.
And that is in part 2.
Yes.
It was hinted to in part 2.
Okay. And then MD also answered correctly.
Water.
Water is what they would consider something so sacred and to share, right?
They would take it, and no one actually owns it. It's given to the CH, and then it's redistributed to the Fremen only. They don't give it to the outsiders.
Does it come from a bottomless well?
No.
Mostly human bodies.
Well, they did collect quite a bit. And so they do have what are, wind traps where they can collect water. But they also have these things called still suits that they wear that collect the perspiration, urine, even collects feces and everything. And they just suck the water out of everything and they collect it that way. So it's
Arrakis
recycled.
is very dry.
So
planet is very, very dry.
I did not bring any pictures, but I've been to Saudi Arabia, and I can imagine. I've been out in the deep desert. This would be very much like that. You can go out. A white boy like me, it takes me like 3 seconds before I get a sunburn. But if you go at night, travels better. It can get really cold out there too at times. And then MD also added spice as being something that was very important to the Fremen as well.
Important to the Fremen, but not the most important. The water would be the most important. Spice would be secondary. Spice would be, however, more important to the off-worlders than to the natives. So.
Okay. All right. So you've gone through all of them?
There's one last point I wanted to point out, and that definitely because it came up in the movie. It doesn't come up so much in the book, so it's not referred to as this, but I've mentioned it a couple of times so far. They refer to the one who fulfills the prophecy as a new prophet. He is the prophet, and he's referred to sometimes not even using his name, but as the prophet. Would that be something that would be allowed in Islam? Referring to someone new as the prophet?
Okay, so we need to start. We need to have a starting spot here. This is assuming that Sunni Islam was used as a combination with Zen Buddhism, right? So according to Sunni Islam, in the year, what would be 22,000 and change.
Mm-hmm.
This is, I think it'd be fair to say, after Muhammad, right?
Fair to say after Muhammad.
They have a new prophet.
A new prophet.
Okay.
Absolutely. A new prophet. Would that be something that would be considered? Now, again, the whole concept of a prophet doesn't come from Buddhism so much. So it would have to be coming from Islam itself. That would have to be the basis that the Bene Jesuits use to pull that concept out, as well as the concept of the Messiah. So if someone were to come along now, even nowadays, and call themselves an Islamic prophet, what would be the response, Thaddeus?
Well, we don't have to speculate, because this does happen from time to time in world history, where someone comes along and says they are a new prophet after Muhammad, just the next in the line of a long line of prophets, not inconsistent with what Muhammad said up until that point. But the problem is he also claims to be the last prophet, that there would be no prophet after him. Now, it's interesting, though, because the reason Muhammad says he's the last prophet, not what Muslims believe, to be clear, but the reason he says it is because literally every language and every people group and every city and every society has already received a prophet. There's only one group left that hasn't, and thus there's no room for another prophet after him, because each city group, each people, whatever you want to say, gets one prophet for themselves. And the Arab-speaking Bedouin people have not received a prophet yet, and that's is Muhammad's responsibility. Now, Muslims today say he's the last prophet because he's for all of humanity and universal and whatnot. But either way, in either scenario, there's no room for another prophet.
Okay, so I have another comment here by MD. He said the Fremen believed I think he meant to say that Paul was the Mahdi, the Messiah, and then became the prophet after he was blinded and walked into the desert. So there was a process there that happened. So it's definitely in the books, and it is one of the terms that they use for the Fremen, that the Fremen uses. Believe it is a Arabic term.
Now, there is something else they added into this part 2 that definitely wasn't in part 1 and wasn't in the original book. They keep referring to every time something happens with this individual and he fulfills any sort of prophecy or anything like that. He says there's an individual there that will refer to it as it was written. So it implies that there's some sort of writing of this prophecy coming. That implies that there might be some sort of either book or tapestry or something along the line, and there is definitely in part 1 a book that they're reading from. I don't know if that's supposed to be the Orange Catholic Bible or something along the line, but other than that, they do not ever pull out a Quran.
No,
that's completely not there.
You did see in that video that we had there that someone did have a small book going through, but never mention of a holy book or anything like that associated with it. And again, I want to make this very clear. 20,000 years in the future, we are not saying that this is Islam. We're saying it's the opposite, that this is not. It has the appearances of looking at that because of some of the the surface. You have the prayer, some kind of prayers. You have the architecture that looks like that, the wording that looks like that, the maybe even some of the actions. They look like Bedouins that are there.
The clothing, they definitely have a full burqa in it. They have actually multiple burqas in it. Those sort of looks, they aren't. It's just skin deep. There's nothing more to it than that. And I don't want anyone to go off the assumption that this is what Islam is, or even close in any way, shape, or form, because as we've shown, they kind of missed every pillar except for like half of one.
Yeah. So I think, whoops, not that one. Sorry. Jack, it just jumped just as I was putting that in there. Wasn't planning on putting that one in. Jack Ray said, is not Lam. So yeah, that would be, I think it would be clear to say that after doing this cursory look over this, there's very little, if any, similarities to Islam today would be seen as the mixture of religions that the Fremen have.
So did you say that they actually used the term Mahdi for
yes.
the Messiah?
Yes.
So
yes,
the Mahdi is not Muhammad. It's not Jesus. It's another figure. They don't call it a prophet, but this is a figure that prefigures the end times, where, interestingly, Jesus returns in Islamic theology, but ignoring that, right? So he is a figure that's kind of preparing for the end of times. They wouldn't use the term prophet, but other than using the term prophet, it does seem to actually have a similar purpose. However, there's something very, very humorous about this Messiah or Mahdi in the Dune universe, and that's that his name is Paul, the most hated figure possible in Islam.
That did not escape me. Yes. Paul muad'dib. Paul Atreides. Yep. Yeah, Muslims don't like Paul too much.
Yeah, imagine telling Muslims that the Mahdi was going to be Paul. That's all I want to say. That was very humorous. So I do think that you could say it's vaguely related. There's probably some inspiration there. Given 20,000 years of human development, I could potentially see Islam developing in any possible way because there is no real foundational truth to it. It has changed drastically over the 14 centuries that it has existed. So I could see it changing. But what you've described is nothing like Islam as practiced today.
No. And in fact, I'm thinking Islam is entering into another massive change period if it survives over the next 50 to even 100 years, if that.
So there are some Arabic terms used in Dune. Jacobsa is one of the fictional languages in Dune. Is spoken by some of the Fremen and the Bene Gesserit. The author of Dune, Frank Herbert, borrows words from modern Earth languages, including Kwisatz Haderach. Any guess on where they got that word from? Where he borrowed that? Any language? Do you think Kwisatz Haderach?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Well, it comes from the actual word in this language is Kefetzat Haderach. It's Hebrew, which means constricting the path. And in Jacobsa is supposed to mean the shortening of the way. Now, this was a primary word used for the primary character. There's a primary name. He was prophesied, the Kwisatz Haderach was a super being that the Bene Gesserits were trying to modify the genetic pool of humanity in such a way that they get this one particular line and have this person who can see into the future and have these other kind of characteristics. So genetic breeding. They had their own breeding program that they were doing. And for, I think it's like 1,000 generations or so, it's basically over 10,000 years that they've been doing this. And finally, they have this Kwisatz Haderach, and that's supposed to be the main character in this movie. And so that is a Hebrew word that is used. And then we have another word. I'm going to put this out here, see if you can guess what language this comes from. The Padishah emperors are also a key character or a key role in the story. Any idea where Padishah comes from?
Is it Indian? I actually don't know off the top of my head, but
okay, it is this. I'm watching the chat to see if anybody knows this. So it is the Sikhs that use the term Padishah.
Oh, okay.
And a Padishah is a term for God and the 10 gurus, according to them. Another word is Africanus. It's the Landsrad. That's from Afrikaans. And lisan al-gaib. The French, that was the Fremen term for an off-world prophet or Messiah that was become. They have several words for this Messiah. The lisan al-gaib. See if anybody knows what language that is. And Hachi, you says sounds Indian. I'm wondering if that was Padishah. That was for Padishah. Close. It was the Mughals that used that term. So it was used in India.
That was close.
You were close?
Yeah, I said India.
Did you say India?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
Well, he said India.
Well, I said it first.
Did you say it first?
At least chronologically. I don't know if he saw it. They say it first.
Okay, I'm going to put this comment out. Works. MD says, I have felt that the Tlilaxu were also culturally like Muslims, how divided their sexes were and how they viewed outworlders. Yeah, I almost wonder if that's not Waddle, the language of the Aztecs.
Yeah, that definitely looks like it.
TL, whenever you put the TL together like that.
It TL, XU. Looks like it.
Okay, and poor Hutchie said, your brother in Christ said it just before me. Missed it by that.
Victory. Victory.
Smart people think alike.
I think that's probably it.
I just got to it before you were able to type it.
So the lisan al-gaib is a word that you heard a lot, especially in the first movie that came out. The term comes from the Arabic lisan, meaning tongue, and potentially al-gaib, meaning the hidden. They also have this combat. We had an image of it earlier where the Fremen challenges Paul Atreides to this fight to the death, basically, to prove, basically, it's like there's been a breach of etiquette, or you said something that you shouldn't have, or we're saying who the leader is, things like that. They would be this fight to the death. It's very big on an honor culture, and that's one thing that the Fremen had that maybe we can say, at least in some cultures within Islam, would we say that they're honor-based?
Honor and shame based, yeah.
Honor and shame. Okay, so that was a big part of it. So that is one similarity between them. The name for this challenge that the Fremen had was Tahidi. I'm hoping that somebody knows Arabic. It means in Arabic, it means challenge of the proof, that you're proving yourself that way. And here we go. Voice from the outer world. Lisan al-Tayyib. So, Lisan al-Gaib, which would be hidden tongue in Arabic, voice from the outer world. So you can see where those two are connected. 20,000 years is a long time to consider how many religions are no longer around that existed 2,000 years ago. So I got a lot of flack. We had that video on religion in Dune. I wouldn't say it went viral, but for me, it got a lot of hits and a lot of flack from people to say that didn't watch the video. They just looked at the thumbnail and they looked at what the title was. And they said, oh, you're an idiot for saying Christianity is going to be around 20,000 years from now. It's just a Stone Age religion, blah, 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 blah. It's going to eventually fade. So I've had a lot of fun discussions since then on this. And maybe we'll even bring that up as a topic one day and just talk about that. Because is there anything, first of all, did Christianity have a positive impact? Did it have any impact at all? Because that was a couple of things to say, just a little blip on the map and there's nothing there. And finally,
little blip.
Yeah, that someone does not understand Western culture, right? So, and finally not being here. And I'm saying, well, if we're talking about just a made up religion, the answer would be yes, it would come and go. But if it's something that has worship and relationship with an eternal God that's outside of time, it doesn't matter how many years it's going to be. Right, that it's going to continue. So, yeah, some fun cults. I mean, some fun discussions. And this the chat is moving so fast. It's hard for me to click on the right ones here. So, shai-hulud was another one that was actually an Arabic term. Shai-hulud, and we already talked about shaitan as being an Arabic word as well. So all these come in. I'm looking for any last comments as we probably bring this to a close. And it looks like we're getting a lot of good ones here in the chat. So I'm going to bring a couple of these up. Yes, I think that's why the Jews hide a lot of keywords from the world. I know Zine bless. So one of the yes, a lot of the terms that the Jews have had is they do want to. I'm not even sure they want anybody to know the sacred name of God. They held that in such high regard that even reading their scriptures, when they got to it, the sacred name for God, they would put another name for God in itself. Their word Adonai, meaning Lord. And there's a whole story behind that goes beyond the scope of tonight's message. And
Muslims messed that one up. They don't get that message.
Yeah, that's kind of odd. Because Why would they not?
They like trading the Lord for Muhammad. In a lot of the biblical passages about Muhammad, they'll contribute it to Muhammad when it's the Lord, which means Yahweh.
Yeah, I want to give you guys a hint. Whenever you see Lord, especially in the Old Testament in small caps, capital L and then small caps O-R-D, that's the holy word for God, the Tetragrammaton, Yahweh. And they would be so careful in saying that, because it's one of the 10 commandments, don't take God's name in vain, that they would put Adonai instead. If you say that somebody is Yahweh, that's
blasphemy on
that's
so
blasphemy.
many levels.
And Yahweh means I am. And Jesus said, before Abraham was, I am. So either he's very bad at his grammar, or he actually meant something there. And I believe we could probably say that he did mean something because of the reaction of the Jews around him.
The reaction of the Jews reaching down to stone him immediately afterwards. The fact that that was acceptable according to the Romans who were ruling at the time. That was an acceptable way they could stone or sentence someone to death by stoning only for a religious violation. So that would be something with their religion. They could stone each other based upon that. And blasphemy would be the highest form. In fact, there is no other identity claim that was out there that would cause a blasphemy charge. And that's specifically what he was asked in that case was, who are you? Before Abraham was, I am.
Yeah.
So he was answering a question about his identity, who he was. And he says, hey, I am Yahweh. Plain and simple. And they're like, we're going to kill you now.
Right.
So,
and Hutchie, oh, sorry. It jumped again. Hutchie mentioned that, or G dash D when writing. And that was another way to show respect to God's name, is by doing that, taking out the vowel. And somebody say, oh, you're ruining God's name and putting that in there. No, it's just a way of showing respect for that. Okay, so I think that's about it. So we've gone over the fact, if you just joined us, we've gone over the looking at who the Fremen were, what their religion was, and then go down the list of saying, hey, the main parts of Islam, the 5 pillars of Islam, we're going to compare that to what the Fremen did or said or believed, and see, does anything match up? And the answer is not really.
Not really anything
at all.
There's a little bit, but you have to stand on your head and kind of squint your eyes to get it. It's more of a form of communism or socialism.
Yeah, and we weren't really expecting to see that. This is, again, 20,000 years in the future. But just for moviegoers to say that they're going to go see this and get that impression that, hey, this is Islam that they're practicing, the answer, I think we can probably say, is no, that it doesn't. So we have coming up this Saturday, we're going to do a review on the second part of Dune. This is going to be fresh from the theater, coming out, and you've actually...
I already watched it. I just watched it a couple hours ago. I just finished it up.
So you're not allowed to say anything about it right now?
I've already been saying things about it this entire life. What are you talking about? We've already covered parts from it. You don't know
but they were not really plot elements.
No,
not really plot elements.
No. But we're going to be doing that Saturday at noon. It's going to be another live stream. Please join us if you like that. And then next week, there's going to be a surprise because it's going to be sort of off the cuff. I'm going to be at a conference next week. You're going to be at a conference next week. And I'm going to try to do some live streaming there, but never have done this in this kind of venue before. So do not know what's going to happen. But this is going to be very exciting next week. We're going to have a whole lot of new material, and looking forward to getting to that too. We're also working on another, I think I can go ahead and say it, another Skeptic Zone video skit like we did before. And this is going to be a good one. I'm looking forward to it. And we're going to have some return guests on that as well. So,
as well as possibly some new ones.
Yes.
Counts on who we can rope into this utter foolishness that we must explore.
I'm looking forward to that. So until then, We'll see you guys and have a great evening.